Finley to throw. Over the middle, intercepted. Wolford again. Wolford the other way at the 30, the 40. Wolford to midfield. Miles Wolford with the pick. The Heels on the doorstep of an enormous victory.
Williams is the running back next to Howe. Play action. Howe will now lob it down the near side. Newsom with a man all over him. Pins the ball against the back of the defender and brings it in. Heels can get a first down at the 3. Howe, pump fake to the right. Now he's going to run to the left. Howe at the 5. Takes the shot. Pinballing off the chains for the touchdown. Sam Howe showing the toughness for 6. Orioles down 4, 35-31. May has the shotgun snap. Pressure coming. Rolls to the right. Goes to the end zone. Touchdown! Touchdown, Antoine Green! 16 seconds to go. No flag. Snapping it off the 8-yard line. May pulls it, tries to roll to the front. Oh, now he's going to throw it and score! Throws it to Paytor in the end zone for the touchdown. They are going to play for left-handed. Was rolling out on the run and threw it left-handed. Bernard fields it at the 26. Heading to the far side. Theo at the 35. Theo, he's at the 50. No, he's not. Yes, he is. Theo, he's going to take it for a touchdown. Are you kidding me?
What's going on, guys? Welcome into another edition of the Heel Tough Blog podcast. It's your host, Anthony Pagnotta, here with you guys as always. Just wanted to start out this edition of the podcast by apologizing to some people. We did have some comments in the comments section before we got started here tonight, asking us if we were going to go live. I forgot that when you do put up when you do pull up a session for StreamYard, that it does automatically send out a message that you have an upcoming edition of the podcast coming up, and that it should have started at whatever time you created that session. So that's my bad. Moving forward, I'll make sure that I do schedule it out a little bit better so you guys will know that it will be at the time that it is expected to be at. And so we're here tonight. Plenty to talk about here on this edition of the podcast. It's going to be a recruiting edition of the podcast on the football side of things. So if you guys don't know, not basketball, we got some stuff coming up tomorrow that we're going to do for that. But tonight, a little bit of a football day because you did have a major decommitment in the 2027 class that we're going to have to talk about. That's a tough one for Carolina to lose. And so we'll have to talk about what the impacts are of that loss for Carolina and really where they go next at the safety position after losing their top prospect in this class. And so, you know what? Let's just get into that right now. We'll talk about the other two guys that Carolina ended up landing. But I think the thing that most people want to talk about here tonight is the fact that Carolina is down its best player in the 2027 class now. This according to Hayes Fawcett of Rivals earlier today when he reported that 2027 four-star safety Marquis Bryant has decommitted from Carolina. He was last week on a visit to Tennessee. Don't know if that was part of the influence as to why he ends up decommitting. There have been some people that have told me that it could be Clemson is the school that he's potentially looking at. So there is the possibility of that. But yes, this is a big decommitment for Carolina. There's no doubt about it. Was the top-rated prospect in the class for the Tar Heels, the number 188 overall prospect and the number 19 safety prospect currently, according to Rivals Composite. Really a talented safety. I mean, you look at what he did last year at the high school level, finished with 32 total tackles, 7 interceptions, and 2 forced fumbles for a Rollsville team that definitely underachieved a year ago, but it wasn't because of him. He stepped his game up to a whole nother level. He was a big part of why their defense was so successful. And for Carolina to lose this one, that's a pretty tough pill to swallow because not only is this the top target that the top commit that Carolina had in the class. This is also the only guy that Carolina had committed to the class that, what was an in-state prospect. And so now Carolina goes back to not having an in-state prospect in this class. There are some guys that Carolina is certainly chasing after, but, we go back to, the thing that we've talked about a lot here over the years on this podcast. And that's that, when you look at it, Carolina's most successful teams that they've had have typically been when they have had a lot of in-state products. And, look, I don't know if that's if that's necessarily the way that Bill Belichick and his staff want to build things. But, for me, I think that's the preferred way for Carolina to build. I think that's the smartest way for Carolina to build. And so, yeah, it's pretty difficult to see that Carolina is not recruiting well in the state of North Carolina. Now, we still got a long way to go. But, you look at the commits that Carolina has right now. We're going to talk about two of these guys coming up here, and Tashim Butler and Isaiah Stevens, who Carolina landed over the weekend. And you're talking about two guys that are originally from the state of California in Chuck Roberts, who is now a player at IMG Academy, and then Skylar Robinson, who's still out there playing at Juniper Serra High School in Los Angeles. And so, you look at those guys, you look at Butler, a guy from the state of New Jersey. Carolina's been up there before. They've had some success recruiting that state. And then the state of Arkansas, Carolina goes into to get Isaiah Stevens. And so, look, I like the fact that Carolina is wanting to be national. There's no doubt that that's something that they want to do under Bill Belichick. I think that was something that they were hoping they were going to be able to do a better job of under Mac Brown. But when you have had the most success for Carolina on the gridiron, it has come when they have recruited in-state prospects the best. And you just look at some of the top guys in the state of North Carolina at this point, and it just doesn't feel like Carolina has a lot of guys that they're doing well with. It doesn't feel like there's a lot that you would expect that Carolina would be able to land at the end of the day. So, I think that's frustrating, especially this is now the second guy that you've had committed to you in this class that you've lost from Rollsville High School. And that's one of the high schools that you want to be in good standing with, because when you look at it, it's one of the most successful schools over the last handful of years in the state of North Carolina. There are some other ones that I think are definitely on the come up. I'm not saying it's the most important one that you should be looking to establish a pipeline with. I think a school like Huff, which has the most talent maybe of any school in the entire state and one of the most talented schools really on the entire East Coast, I think that's certainly one that you would hope that Carolina is, in good standing with. But it just doesn't seem like this is, this is what Carolina's focus is. And so that's a little bit frustrating. Hopefully, with Marquis Bryant, hopefully he's a guy that Carolina can still continue to pursue and potentially recruit here over the next handful of weeks and months. Hopefully they could get him back to campus during the summer, because it feels like, you look around, at the running back position, I feel like there were a lot of other guys that Carolina started offering, and it made a lot of sense that Carolina was, potentially moving on from Amir Brown, or really at that time, I think it was just Carolina reacting to the fact that they lost Amir Brown. It ends up working out where Carolina's got more offers out there. Carolina's got 25 offers to safeties in this class. And you look at the other guys that Carolina has offered, there's not really anybody else that you feel like Carolina's in great standing with. I don't think they're in a bad spot with a guy like Royalton Allen of Oak Hills High School out there in Hesperia, California, but I don't know if they're necessarily the favorite. Right now it looks like UCLA is the team that's favored out of everybody. He does have an official visit that's scheduled to Carolina, which is a step in the right direction. But outside of that, that's really it. You look at some of the other guys that you could potentially be looking at, in-state guy, as I mentioned, talking about Huff High School, Davian Jones, the transfer over from West Meck High School. And right now, doesn't look like Carolina's really in the thick of things for him. There's a couple of other guys that Carolina has offered, but they definitely seem to be distanced from, including a guy like Gabe Jenkins out of Amani Christian Academy in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And then there's another guy in state that I think Carolina should be pushing hard for, but it doesn't seem like they're in a great spot with him either, in Lance Henderson. That was one of the guys that was on my top 20 most wanted list for the 2027 class. They doesn't seem like Carolina's making any sort of headway with him. And so when you look at that and you weigh it against, what Carolina's needs are, they're going to need some safeties in this class. They've already got one in Chuck Roberts, and that's important, but you need probably a second one. And so I definitely think this is frustrating if you're Carolina. Hopefully you can still recruit Marquis Bryant here over the next handful of weeks. Try to get yourself back in the good graces with him and potentially re-land his commitment when it's all said and done. But this is certainly not what you were looking for if you were Carolina to start the day. Now you talk about the guys that Carolina did land. Let's get to some positivity here after a little bit of frustration. I think when you look at the two guys that Carolina got, first of all, one of them is trending way up since Carolina got him, and that is Tashim Butler, the linebacker out of Glassboro High School in Glassboro, New Jersey. This was a guy that was rated outside of the top 1,000 when Carolina ended up landing him. This is, less than a week ago that Carolina ends up landing his commitment, and they landed it on Saturday. He was the number 1,041 prospect in the class, the number 87 linebacker in the class, according to the Rivals composite rankings. You look now at where he's at, and all of a sudden, I look today, he has climbed all the way up to 612th in the composite rankings, 49, the number 49 linebacker in the class. And so he has made a significant jump. And I think part of it is that you go back and you look at the production that he brings to the table, incredibly productive. I mean, one of the more productive players probably in this class for the linebacker group from last year. 138 total tackles, 34 tackles for loss, 8 sacks, 9 quarterback hurries, 1 pass deflection, and a forced fumble. He was tremendous at Glassboro High School this past year. And so it makes a little bit of sense that people are, potentially throwing on the tape, seeing that production and saying to themselves, this is a guy that needs to climb. When I watched his tape, really fun tape to watch. I mean, I think that's one of the things that really stuck out to me was that, some of these tapes, they're very similar. It looks a lot of the same type of stuff. I went through it when I was going through the most wanted list, where you see a lot of film that's somewhat similar to each other. Butler, I thought, was an exciting one, though, to watch at the linebacker spot. And the first thing that sticks out about him is the physicality that he plays with. It really shows up in a multitude of different ways, but especially when he's shedding blocks and meeting ball carriers in the hole. That's the important thing, is that you want him to be physical at the point of attack. And I think you see that. He does a great job of even engaging interior offensive linemen in some of those plays where he's trying to knife his way into the backfield, where he's potentially trying to get into the backfield for a sack. He's running through guys on the offensive line in order to get there. And so I think that's really impressive. He's doing the same thing when it comes to meeting ball carriers in the A and B gaps. I think that's certainly something that you want to see. And look, that's the area that he does a decent amount of his damage, but at the same time, really good speed. He plays sideline to sideline, has the closing speed that he needs to in the open field. I think he certainly has that ability to be able to stretch the field, from sideline to sideline, as I said. And I think just ultimately be able to bring ball carriers down at a high rate. That's what you're looking for from your middle linebacker. Can he take away the majority of the field? And I feel like he's a guy that can do that. I think he's someone that can cover a lot of ground really quickly, and is somebody that really does a good job of making plays when he's there. I mean, 138 total tackles. That's really all you need to know as to whether or not he's someone that can make an impact. Typically you'll see some linebackers, that are in the 40s, 50s, maybe, even 60s. Those are some lower numbers. And again, the one thing that I always caution about some of these numbers when you read into them is that some of them are a little skewed. There are times where, a guy literally just jumps onto a pile late and they'll end up giving them an assisted tackle. Don't know if that's necessarily the case here, but from everything that I saw on his film, he looks like a very short tackler, looks like a guy that knows how to tackle in one-on-one situations, and that's the most important thing when you're out in space. The thing that you really look for in a lot of linebackers is what do you see from them in coverage? You don't see them much in coverage, so there definitely are some questions that are going to be brought up. But at the same time, whenever you do see him drop into coverage, there's a couple of different, clips of him dropping into coverage on his film. Looks natural, definitely has the tools, I think, to be successful in that area. And so I think that's what you're looking for when you turn on the film. You're not looking for someone that's incredibly polished in that area. There are some linebackers that are really polished in that area. I told you about a few of them when I was going through my most wanted list. But there's other guys, especially guys that are really involved in the run game heavily. With the high school game, there are a lot of run-heavy offenses that you're going to play. It's going to make sense that you're going to see, especially the lower you are in terms of classification, teams are going to want to make games competitive. And so the easy way to do that is to run the football and waste time and shorten the game. I think that's one of the reasons you see a lot of high schools with run-heavy offenses. And so it makes sense that he's a guy that you see a lot of the tape showing that he's a run-heavy guy, but I think that's where he's going to specialize. I think he's going to be someone that if he can drop into coverage and give you something there, as long as he's serviceable enough, you'll take that. The other thing that I like about him is, he's another guy that we've seen, and there are, a decent amount of guys that I watched when I was going through my most wanted list. You see a lot of guys, and this is something that I think is a little bit new from what I've noticed. See a lot more guys in this 27 class that play on special teams. And so, he was one of those guys that stood out. I mean, he played a bunch of special team snaps, puts a decent amount of them on his highlight tape. And I think that shows, you bring something to the table that maybe some of these other guys don't. You're going to be willing to play special teams. And so, I think that's very key for Carolina, because what it allows is for them to be able to get him on the field early. I think there definitely is a lot of potential, and the production makes it easy to be excited about what he brings to the table. But I think what you really like is the fact that he is a guy that's willing to play on special teams. That's where he can make his hay early. And then from there, potentially challenge to either be a rotational piece, or even if he's a guy that has to wait a couple of years, I think he can develop into a pretty good linebacker for the Tar Heels. So really like what he brings to the table. Again, not going to stun you with the athleticism or anything like that. But I think really they looked at the production. They looked at some of the things that he showed on tape, and some of the ability to cover sideline to sideline while playing downhill. And I think that's what really stood out to them. Now we move on to the running back that Carolina landed on Saturday. That would be 2027 unranked running back Isaiah Stevens out of Sheridan High School down there in Sheridan, Arkansas. This past year as a junior, ran for 1,381 yards and 21 touchdowns on 197 carries. Also caught 48 passes for 619 yards and 4 touchdowns in 11 games. The year prior as a sophomore, he ran for 1,526 yards, 21 touchdowns on 197 carries, and caught 61 passes for 911 yards and 9 touchdowns. He did that in just 11 games. Same thing with what he did this year. And so incredibly productive. Again, we go back to the past class that Carolina brought in. 2026 was a very traitsy class. It was one where they were looking for guys that had certain traits that they brought to the table, were incredibly athletic. I think this class is a little bit different. I think they're looking for guys that they know are going to be productive at this level. And when you look at Stevens, I think that's what you see from him. When I was going through my running backs, I ended up leaving him off of the list. He was one of the guys that I did look at, though. But I really did like some things about his game. I think the first thing that, really jumped out to me was his speed and acceleration. Really good burst off the line of scrimmage or when he gets the football. Really from that moment, he's able to turn it up quick and get to top speed very fast. And that's what you want to see. And then when he's at top speed, he can really fly. That's something that Carolina needs in their backfield. I think it's going to be one of the challenges of this year. I'm really hoping that Jalen McGill is the guy that can bring that to Carolina. But if he can't, then Carolina is still going to be searching for that guy going into this offseason. Maybe, a guy like Crew Davis can bring that to the table eventually down the line, but I don't know how involved he's going to be this year. So you're looking to add other guys that could potentially bring some explosiveness to this room. This is your guy. This is all that he does. I mean, again, when you talk about less than 200 carries and running for almost 1,400 yards this past year, over 1,500 yards the previous year, I think that shows you that there is that burst, there is that home run hitting ability that you really like to see from your running backs, and that's something that Carolina just didn't have enough of this past year. Don't know if they're going to have enough of it this year. And so I think that's one of the main things that they were looking at goal-wise when they were looking in the backfield was, can we find guys with a little more speed? Because I saw going through the tapes of all the guys, that was one thing that really stuck out, where there were a lot of speedsters. There were a lot of guys that really win because of how fast they are, because of their change direction. That's the type of stuff that you want to see from guys that are considered speed merchants. And so that's what I think you've got here. I think one thing that you really like about him as well is the fact that not only is he able to show off the speed, but he also is very difficult to bring down because of how shifty he is. Puts his foot in the ground, changes direction very well, and can really, put some guys out of their shoes in the open field. And so I think that's something that you really like. You want to see a running back that's got a little bit of wiggle out there, especially if they are going to be someone that brings a lot of speed to the equation. And so I think that's the way that he's going to be able to win on some of these downs. That's how he's going to be able to pick up a lot of his yards, because he's so fast, he's so shifty that it's hard to be able to get him on the ground. The other thing that sticks out is that when you look at a guy that has as many receiving yards as he has, and especially, the amount of receptions that he has. You go back to 2 years ago, 61 catches in a season for a running back is a lot. That's you are throwing to your running back heavily. Might have been the leading receiver for them that season. I think that's pretty amazing. That shows you right there. If you're the leading receiver as the starting running back, that is a pretty big statement for what you are doing as a receiver, how talented you are as a receiver. Now, look, does it mean that, maybe they aren't a team that has a lot of threats down the field? That could certainly be in the cards as well. That's certainly something that, when you look back at it, if you're someone that analyzes it a little bit more, maybe that's part of the reason why, and that skews the stats a little bit. But still, he's got that ability in his arsenal to be able to, haul in a bunch of passes for his team. And I think, the fact that, yes, he did in fact, he was second on the team in receiving. So they did have an explosive playmaker that they did go to, but he was second on the team in receiving. That shows you that he's a guy that they really trusted. They felt like they needed to get him the ball often. And so, you're talking about, again, any level that you play at, if you can put together 1,000 at 1,000, that is incredibly impressive. So I mean, we're talking Christian McCaffrey type stuff when you're getting into that type of range. And that's what I compared Crew Davis to, maybe a little bit of a lesser version of what Christian McCaffrey brings to the table. Similar kind of skill set, though, probably more in the vicinity of a guy like Will Shipley, someone like that. That's kind of what you're looking at here, I think, with a guy like Isaiah Stevens, is someone that is not only going to be very effective running the football for you, but has the hands, has the route running ability to be able to succeed at a high level. Now, the thing is for him, what's also impressive is that most of his receiving comes out of the backfield. From what I remember about watching his tape, and I went back and watched it the other day on Saturday too. But what I remember from watching it was that, he wasn't a guy that split out a lot at wide receiver. There are some guys in this class that I went through where they split out at wide receiver. They're really running routes, and credit to them. I mean, they're great players. That really shows you how good you are if you're a running back that learns how to run routes the way that some of these guys do. But that's the reason they're able to succeed. That's the reason that they're putting up as many yards and as many receptions as they're putting up. This guy isn't really doing that. He's doing most of this from the backfield. So a weapon for Carolina, no doubt about that, a weapon for whatever quarterback, whether it's the same quarterback from this year or if you're having to make that transition again. Let's say that Billy Edwards Jr. comes in this year and really just burns it up. Or, even if he doesn't, he's only got 1 year of eligibility left. And so from there, Carolina would have to find another quarterback and would once again be going through another battle. This could be a guy that could sort of help ease you into that type of situation if Carolina was to have to go through that again this next coming year. And at this point, I mean, look, 3 years in a row where Carolina's had a quarterback battle to start the season, or at least going into spring practice. I wouldn't doubt it if Carolina's right back where they are for a 4th straight season starting next year. One other thing that I wanted to talk about with Stevens is, in terms of what his early impact is going to be. Don't know if he's a guy that immediately comes in and has a huge impact. I don't think this is one of those guys like that's all of a sudden as an unranked prospect going to jump into being a 4-star prospect, somebody that we're going to be looking at and saying, this guy's got a chance to immediately get on the field. But like I said, if Carolina doesn't find that threat, let's say that Jalen McGill doesn't become that guy for Carolina this year that can be an explosive player, can create some of those big runs because of the speed that he brings to the table, then I think you're probably going to have to look for that guy next year. And there's a good chance that Isaiah Stevens could get a look. So I wouldn't rule it completely out that he makes an early impact here at Carolina. But, he could be a guy that takes a little bit of time to work up the depth chart. Even if he does, I think he's got the skill set to be a pretty successful back for Carolina and be one of the more complete running backs that Carolina has had in recent years, dating back to some of the guys that Carolina had under Mac Brown. So, a lot of excitement around those two guys, even with the decommitment of Marquis Bryant. And so make sure you guys head over to the website, HeelToughBlog.com. We got an article up there about Marquis Bryant, a little more in depth on what exactly, happened with Marquis Bryant, what Carolina ends up losing in him. So make sure you head over there and check that out. Also, make sure you check out the article that we got up there about spring practice. We do have a look at the underclassmen that we expect to potentially have a big impact for Carolina here in spring practice. That's also up there for you guys to check out. And then if you want to, you can even go back to the article that we wrote about the most important battles in spring practice. And of course, we're not getting a lot now. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to get up there for any of these practices. I was hoping that maybe I could get up there for one of the ones here in April, but I'm going to have to see whether or not I can switch my schedule to be able to get up there in time for, even if I don't get there for the pressers, be able to get there to get some eyes on this football team. It's going to be easier to be able to track these guys this year. And this is why I'm really hoping that they're waiting and eventually going to announce that they are going to have some sort of practice like a pro event, or, a spring game, a traditional spring game that they've done in years past, because they are wearing the numbers this year. So it's going to be easier to identify guys. It's going to be easier to figure out who is performing well. Hopefully they do something like that, but still, to this point, I have not seen anything that has been officially announced by the program. I have not heard anything from any of the people that cover the team a little more in depth than I'm able to. And so that is certainly disappointing. Hopefully that's something that changes here in the near future, and that we do get some sort of update that gives us a look at what exactly this team looks like for this year. But any other news and tidbits that comes out of spring practice, any other news that comes out on the recruiting front, we will have you covered over on HeelToughBlog.com. The most important reason why you want to be over on the website right now, though, guys, and you want to be checking it morning, afternoon, and evening, is because of the news that's coming out around the Tar Heel coaching search on the basketball side of things. Hubert Davis was, of course, fired. Carolina looking for its next head coach. And really, it looks like Carolina's in a waiting pattern. They're willing to wait it out until after the NCAA tournament is complete. Once the Final Four gets here, it's usually, business halts and everybody kind of goes to Indianapolis, wherever the Final Four is being held. This year it is in Indy. So it seems like just about every other year it's in Indy. But regardless, they are going to be out there. The sport shuts down. And so we'll have to just wait. But we are going to have updates for you on, if anybody removes their name from the running, if any other names seem to surge, any of that kind of news, we'll have that for you on the website. And of course, we'll also have that for you on the same channels that you are watching this podcast. So on the Twitter page, on the Facebook page, and on the YouTube page, we will have live editions of the Four Corners podcast for you guys. We're doing them live here at night for you guys. Some of the ones earlier in the season we did have to record because it was just easier with the schedules that we had. We're going to be recording these live for you guys because we want your interactions. I think tomorrow's is going to be a little bit earlier in the afternoon because I do end up having to work tomorrow night. But still, you're going to want to check in on that. We're going to be having some great conversation about the latest that we're hearing on the coaching search. So make sure that you guys are tuned into that same channels that you're watching this to sometime tomorrow for you guys. So keep an eye out. Best way to do it, make sure you subscribe to the YouTube page because that will alert you whenever we go live on that YouTube page. Did it tonight. So, for you guys that are big YouTube people, make sure you go over there to the YouTube page and subscribe to it. Don't just watch the videos. The subscription is really what helps us and also helps you guys. And then, over on the Facebook page, make sure you like and follow the Facebook page. We greatly appreciate that. Same thing with the Twitter page. You can hit the follow button up there. Also, if you want to, turn on those post notifications for Heel Tough Blog because the only things that we tweet out are our content or something like today. Josh did put up a great reminder that it was 5 years ago today that Roy Williams did end up retiring from Carolina. So make sure that you guys are following along with us there. We would greatly appreciate that. So that wraps it up for this edition of the podcast tonight, guys. Want to thank all of you that have been watching this edition of the podcast and listening. And as always, go Tar Heels.